Questions anytime, just raise your hand. Really, this is, from my understanding, so that you guys get better informed about what we do. And I'm not sure your backgrounds or what knowledge you have, so I'll talk a little bit, but just feel free to ask questions about anything production ag related. My name is Jason Wyckoff. I went to school here at New Prairie, went to college for engineering, and then left that and continued our family farm. We raise corn, soybeans, and seed corn. In this local area, we produce seed corn for Monsanto, and I think later we'll talk about the company Monsanto and some of the connotations that word has in agriculture. Meg emailed me some questions that you guys have, so I want to talk about a few of those things. One thing I want to say first is that the people here and myself, farmers have a passion for growing either plants or livestock or whatever. We're growing food, and they have a passion for that. And part of that is, in order to continue to do that, they've got to be profitable and have to manage it as a business to be able to continue to do it. But their passion comes in growing and taking care of either the livestock or the plants, and that's what we do. You got pictures you're going to roll through or anything, just to help me out?
Yeah, I've got your shop. I've got the equipment that was out.
Yeah.
I've got you working on it.
So, does anybody have any farming background or any agriculture background? Somebody said something about buffalo over here.
Yeah.
You raising buffalo?
Yeah, bison and beef cattle.
Okay, so,
Grow hay.
all right, excellent. Yeah, so you know a little bit of what it's about and taking care of it. It's a daily
Yeah,
adventure. Yeah, well, good for you. So I was going to kind of go through a typical year for a farmer growing crops and then kind of get into some of these questions. So like right now, today, we're preparing fields for planting. We'll be planting very soon. So it's, like she said, today on a sunny day, it's very difficult to be inside and move. But this time of year, April, May is when guys are planting the crops. June, July, they'll be continue taking care of those crops, fertilizing them, applying herbicides to control weeds, and then harvesting will be sort of in that October, November time frame. And then in the winter we work on equipment. There's a picture here. Some of the questions that she has, it has to do with runoff of fertilizer and pesticides. So do we have any issues with that? And I think most producers, it's our job to utilize the products that we're putting on fields well and to make sure that we're not having runoff. And part of that is how we prepare the soil for planting. One of the ways that we do that, and I think the Volses do as well, is strip tilling. So this is a machine. So let's think back to the days of like the Dust Bowl 70 years ago or so. The only way that farmers could prepare soil is just to work it, to turn it over and just continue to beat it down. And that was really the only weed control as well, is mechanically control weeds with equipment. Well, it did a few things. It was fairly successful for a while we had moisture, but the more times you work soil down, you kind of destroy the soil structure and you leave it vulnerable to erosion and runoff. And so what we're trying to do is reduce how much tillage we use. There's no-till, which is a practice that is very successful at reducing erosion. And essentially, there's no tillage that's done. You just take a planter into a field and plant the crop. We do some strip tillage here where we're trying to, instead of broad tillage where we're working up the entire field, we till a small, maybe 8 to 10 inch wide strip where we're going to plant right into. And we're also applying fertilizer with that. So we place fertilizer kind of right in the root zone instead of broadcasting it across the entire field on top or putting it under the soil where it can't erode away. Some of the technologies that allow us to do this in the last 10, 15 years, you guys have been doing it a little longer, but some of the technologies are making it easier. It is GPS and auto steering on tractors. We can go and strip and use the satellites to control where we're placing that fertilizer. and then we can bring the planter back and get right on top of it. Or before, if you were driving manually, that made it somewhat difficult. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to control erosion and runoff, as well as using cover crops. Cover crops are not a cash crop. So a cash crop is something like, you know, corn, soybeans, or seed corn that you're growing to try to actually sell. Or a cover crop is something that you're growing that is not during the actual growing season of the cash crop. And so its purpose is to control erosion, build soil structure, and prevent leaching of nutrients. And so like this time of year, if you'll see green stuff out in fields or in the winter, that's usually a cover crop.
What would be a cover crop?
Yeah, so there's lots of cover crops, and that's it's gaining a lot of momentum in the last few years. It's an old practice, but there's a lot of renewed interest, and part of that is because of the last few years there's been a little bit of profitability in farming, and it's allowed guys to look at doing some more things. But we use cereal rye, oats, there's tillage radishes, clover.
Do you harvest those then?
No. So yeah, you'll plant it. There's many ways of seeding it, where you can seed it while the crop's still growing. These guys will they'll hire a plane and seed it into the standing crop, and then you just kind of let it grow, and then in the spring you'll terminate it at some point chemically with before or after you plant your normal crop. Yes.
Would it help the soil if you just let the cover crop die, and just would it help any instead of just chemically killing it?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different types of cover crops. There's some that will not overwinter, so you can plant them in the fall, and then once it freezes, that will kill the crop.
Okay.
But the cover crop that will overwinter and go into spring, there are some like clover or you guys have let cereal rye go pretty big.
Yeah, we've done cereal rye.
Yeah.
If I could interject.
Sure.
There's basically three types of cover crops that you would be looking at. Some, the grasses like cereal rye, annual ryegrass, oats, wheat, those types will pick up the nutrients that are in the ground and hold them. Brasilicas, which are the radishes that Jason has mentioned. Turnips are an excellent, probably even better than radishes. Those types of crops basically send roots down and permeate the ground, make it more viable and more useful. And the third type is the kind that fix nitrogens, and those are legumes, peas, clovers, and there's probably a dozen types of clovers that you could use. Those are the types of crops that fix actual nutrients in the ground. What we are learning now is the combination of those what they basically do the most amount of good. The top ones in the grass are annual ryegrass and cereal rye. Those are the top two. From that point on, they put probably turnips and radishes pretty even. Turnips will overwinter where radishes will not. The clovers, crimson clover seems to be the one that it's the fastest growing clover of the legumes. So.
Yeah, and will produce the most nitrogen for like
Right.
your next crop. So in the spring, there's a balance between letting that cover crop grow as long as possible to get the maximum benefits out of it versus trying to get your corn or soybean crop established in a timely manner. And so you don't want the cover crop competing. You want to get the benefits from the cover crop as long as you can, but you need to get your other crop planted in a timely manner, and you don't want them competing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's something we're trying to figure out too. What is that best timing, and the weather plays a big role in that. But so it's kind of an ongoing experiment,
Okay.
at least
And
for
the
us.
2 years are alike, every year is different.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 year keeping the cover crop on longer is better than another year. A couple years ago when we had a hot, dry summer, we had our cover crop out till it was about that tall in some fields, and that was probably the biggest benefit we had because it kept the ground during the summer moist. Where last year, where it was a moist summer, moist spring and cool summer, getting rid of that cover crop early was fine. So every year is different for a farmer. There's no 2 years that's gonna be exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions with cover crops, or does anybody kind of understand what we're talking about as far as what we're trying to do there?
And what all the cover crops actually do. Like I said, with the turnips and the radishes, when they say root system, we're not talking like that. We're talking root systems that go way down. And then, like they said, with the nitrogen, some plants produce nitrogen, other ones they gather it up and they store it in nodules, so that way when your corn or anything grows, it actually breaks those nodules open and use that nitrogen. It allows us to use less nitrogen in the field the following year, so we don't have to put as much on.
Yeah.
So,
What we're trying to do is replace making passes through a field with mechanical tillage. We're trying to replace that with a crop that can extend down deep roots and kind of loosen our soil and do that for us. Trying to grow cover crops that can produce nitrogen or suppress weeds so that we don't have to apply as many pesticides or use as much commercial nitrogen. So that's one benefit we're learning about and trying to employ. But it takes a tremendous amount of management and time, which is it can be difficult to manage versus just going out and using tillage and buying commercial fertilizer and pesticides. So the other question was maintaining the soil and the soil quality and preventing erosion, and we feel that cover crops are a big part of that process and maintaining our soil, as well as reducing tillage and improving the soil quality. I want to talk about seed corn a little bit. We raise seed corn. You guys raise seed corn as well. What seed corn is, so each year guys will go out and plant seed, and in order to plant that seed, they need to have, they buy seed from seed companies. That seed that they're buying is what we produce for seed companies, and the way we do that is we're producing a hybrid seed, and we'll take 2 inbreds, a male and a female, and plant those in a field. And anybody heard of detasseling, or has anybody done any detasseling in the summers here? Yeah, so you're familiar with it. So you'll plant in a pattern of like 4 female rows and 1 male. And on a corn plant has both a male and a female part. The male part is the tassel that has pollen in it, and the female part is the ear corn, where it has the silks kind of come out of the ear. You guys have had sweet corn, all those strings of things, those are the silks. And so in order to get a kernel on that ear, the pollen has to fall and land on each one of those silks and travel and fertilize that, and that's how you get a kernel. And so with seed corn, when you're planting 2 different inbreds, typically you have to plant them at different times to make sure that the male is shedding the pollen at the same time that the female silks are out in the field. And the reason we detassel is so that we can create that hybrid and not have cross-pollination. So we'll take the tassels off of the female plants to just allow the male to cross-pollinate. That's kind of how we create a hybrid. We grow that for Monsanto, the DeKalb brand, which kind of leads into another question about Monsanto. Monsanto is a poster child right now for everything that's wrong in agriculture. I want to ask some people in here, you guys, when you hear the word Monsanto, what are the first things that come to first thoughts? What's that?
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate. Anybody else? Any feelings, any emotions?
I remember on the movie Food Inc., they talked bad about Monsanto a lot.
Sure. Yep. Anybody else? Who hasn't heard? Who's heard of Monsanto? Sure. So, and I want to be clear, I'm not here to try to change anybody's minds. I just want to talk about some of these issues and try to challenge you to make sure you're thinking through things and being informed people and students and consumers of what you're doing, and knowing that there's a lot of organizations that have agendas, good or bad, that are trying to promote their products and can use certain issues as ways to kind of scare people. How about GMOs? Who's heard of a GMO? Yeah. What are the feelings or emotions that come up with that? Just shout them out. We're here to discuss.
Okay, well, I really don't appreciate it, because, I mean, even though it did end world hunger in India, I mean, I feel like we don't really need it to really survive, but, I mean, that's just me.
It's perfectly fine to, everybody has an opinion, and I don't necessarily have an opinion either way as far as what people choose. And one thing I want to be clear about is we're pretty fortunate we really need to understand how blessed we are in this country to have such an abundant food supply that we can have these discussions about how we want to choose how our food is grown. We need to understand that we're pretty lucky. Go ahead.
Again, I'm not that well versed in stuff, but I think GMOs are fine if they're helping people eat, then do it. Do what you can to get food to people who need it. And if it means that we have some more chemicals or hormones in our food, but that means other people that are starving or are in actual risk of dying just from not eating to get GMOs. Get as much food as you can, or as little as you can, as least amount of energy as you can.
Sure.
So I think that makes sense.
I think
Sure.
it should be allowed just in the developing countries, because if we have a choice on whether or not we have a healthy stock of corn or just a corn that's made to fill you up, then I think we should choose the healthy. But some people don't have that choice, and the one is cheaper than the other. So
Yeah, an argument could also be made that choice is I guess I would argue that both could be healthy as well. Whether genetic, I pulled up sort of a definition for genetically modified organism, which is what a GMO is, off the internet in my brief preparation. All right, so the process takes a beneficial trait that helps a living thing thrive in nature, like an ability to use water more sustainably, and adapts that trait to a new plant so it can better survive in its environment. So what companies like Monsanto, and understand too, Monsanto is not the only company that is pursuing science-based biotechnology. Many companies are, but again, like I said, Monsanto is the poster child for everything that kind of involves biotechnology. But so we like science in our medical profession. We like scientists to be working on cures for certain diseases. We like medicines that help us. We trust science and technology and our technology. Everybody's probably in their back pocket's got a phone. We like those sorts of technologies. Believe in them. But there seems to be a fear and some misunderstanding in deploying science and technology in the way we grow food. And I want to encourage you to just really understand that and make sure that you're fully aware either way of that issue of what that science and technology means. So from a farming standpoint, we've been using GMO products for probably 20 plus years. And some of the things that it does for us as producers, it benefits us. We talked about soil erosion and trying to reduce some of the chemicals and the things that we apply. And actually, some of the products that Monsanto has produced has allowed us to do a better job of taking care of our soil. For example, one of the first GMOs that came out was Roundup Ready soybeans. You may have heard of Roundup or glyphosate. So Roundup is a chemical that you can spray and pretty much kills everything that's kind of green and growing except for woody plants, and fairly inexpensive. And prior to using Roundup, there was lots of combinations of expensive chemicals that weren't as benign on the soil as Roundup. So what I think Roundup and that Well, so what Monsanto did, let me back up, they created GMO where they inserted a Roundup gene into a soybean plant so that when you plant soybeans and later in the season you need to go out and control weeds, you could spray Roundup on top of your soybean plants, and the Roundup would kill the weeds and not the soybean plant. Now that didn't mean that was the first time we started spraying chemicals on soybean plants. It just means that was the first time we were able to use Roundup. A glass of water, maybe. And so prior to using Roundup, we were using kind of a concoction of different chemicals that was very expensive. And most guys would refer to using mechanical tillage to control those weeds, which sort of led to erosion and not as much no-till. So in a way, Monsanto contributed a lot to, oh yeah, thanks.